For over 75 years, the Friends Committee on National Legislation has been a driving force for powerful, nonpartisan policy change in Washington. But we know that lasting change doesn't start in Washington, D.C. It comes from ordinary people around the country who speak truth to power. That's why FCNL supports a network of over 120 grassroots advocacy teams around the country. These teams develop long-term relationships with their members of Congress and their staff to drive change in federal policy.
2 years ago, when we were considering our strategy to end endless wars, we thought of not even trying to lobby our conservative representative, but focus instead on our Democratic senator we thought would be easier. But then we said, no, if we really believe that there is that of God in everyone, we need to try, we need to engage. Well, he became a co-sponsor of the legislation we were asking him to support. So working with the advocacy teams has really taught us to expand our horizons and find common ground with others.
Advocacy teams receive in-depth training and regular support from FCNL staff to learn how they can be most effective. They meet with members of Congress, publish in the media, and organize community events to build support around one legislative campaign each year. These grassroots advocates come from a range of backgrounds and faith traditions, but their efforts are rooted in Quaker traditions like deep listening, connecting across shared values, and speaking to that of God in each person, especially when we disagree.
You know, what I like about FCNL is I always feel that you're speaking with moral authority. I feel that you're always on the right side. You're on the side of the angels, and sometimes when it's uncomfortable, you're always annoyingly right on some of these issues.
One of the things that I appreciate most about my advocacy team is the accountability that comes from meeting as a group. It can definitely feel overwhelming to face the work of making large-scale policy change, like ending endless wars, but knowing that we have a huge network across the country that meets every month and that FCNL is providing resources and policy updates for us is both energizing and sustainable.
The best thing about the advocacy teams program is that it works. We've seen firsthand advocacy teams influence congressional offices by encouraging senators and representatives to become champions on key issues, to co-sponsor legislation, and to vote the right way.
The Friends Committee has long been an organization that really understands what peace and justice really means. And not only do you know it intellectually, but you know it and you know how we have to work for it in practice. But I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't have been able to do it had it not been for the Friends Committee and how you all have really gotten to your members of Congress and made sure they understood in no uncertain terms that they had to be accountable.
Having witnessed war in my native Vietnam, I began my peace activism by protesting against the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Now, as an advocacy team member, I find that spiritual grounding is the bedrock of our strengths. In our lobby visits, we project a deep respect for the light in the people we approach, even as we argue forcefully for what we believe. We have had congressional staff welcome us back as friends and tell us how much they appreciate our carefully thought out positions and requests. I never feel more like a citizen than when I go into the halls of Congress to lobby my representative or senator, the feeling that I'm doing my part to make this democracy work.
Ready to join a community of powerful advocates around the country? Go to fcnl.org/advocacy teams to connect with an organizer, get involved with a local team, or start your own.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Thursdays with Friends, our online conversation on current issues. If you're hearing a buzzing sound in the background, there's nothing technically wrong with the connection. It's just the sound of all those cicadas buzzing as they reach their peak in Washington, D.C. this week. We won't see the super bloom again until 2038, which is, if you're doing the math, only 4.5 presidential election cycles away. I'm the show's producer, Wesley Wolf-Bear-Pinkham. Here's our chat host for Thursdays with Friends, FCNL General Secretary Diane Randall, and her guest, Shoshana Abrams, FCNL's Advocacy Team's Manager.
Thank you, Wesley, for that great introduction. And it is a pretty big phenomenon here in Washington, D.C., the cicada sound. It's pretty exciting. I want to welcome all of you joining us from all over the country. This is one of our favorite events that happens at FCNL every other 2 Thursdays a month. So welcome to this Thursdays with Friends, whether you're joining on Zoom or through Facebook or YouTube. I want to give a special shout out to FCNL summer interns who started working with us this week and who joined us on this call. You may see some younger faces. Those are our summer interns who are working remotely, and we're thrilled to have them at FCNL for 8 weeks and with us today. When we were planning over 6 years ago how to strengthen and expand the grassroots network at FCNL, we decided to build on what many of you were already doing. That is, that you were organizing yourselves locally to become stronger with other like-minded grassroots advocates who shared your commitment to peace, to justice, and to building relationships with members of Congress. Our first Advocacy Teams workshop was hosted by friends in Milwaukee. I hope they're with us today. Now we have 126 advocacy teams in 44 states and the District of Columbia. And that's pretty amazing and a real cause for celebration. I am so delighted that the manager of the advocacy team, Shoshana Abrams, is with us today. And those of you who participate in advocacy teams know Shoshana very well because you're in contact with her every month, and she's a real problem solver working with all of you. She grew up in Shenandoah Valley and holds a bachelor's degree in government and international relations from George Mason University, a master's in public policy and conflict resolution from Tel Aviv University. And those of you who don't know Shoshana, that before she joined FCNL, she spent 6 years working for a variety of organizations doing peace building work, including 3 years working for Kids for Peace International, which is a nonpartisan interfaith organization bringing together American, Palestinian, and Israeli teenagers for long-term interpersonal engagement. This year, Shoshana and our advocacy teams are focused on ending endless wars by persuading Congress to repeal the 2002 Iraq authorization for the use of military force. And if you joined us a little early, you saw a great little video that we've put together about our advocacy teams. And I'm going to ask Stephen or Wesley to put that in the chat so that don't look at it now, but when you finish, you might want to watch it and share it with other people. So Shoshana, welcome and talk to us. Tell us what's going on. I think we have some big update probably for a lot of our participants, and tell us what's going on now with the repeal of the 2002 AUMF.
Yeah, thanks so much, Diane, for the introduction, and Wesley for the jokes. I don't know, maybe I should not speak and let Wesley tell more jokes. I think that would be a wonderful contribution. So I'm excited to tell you all a little bit about what's going on with this 2002 Iraq authorization for use of military force. But before I tell you about it, because I'm guessing there are some folks here who don't know what that is and don't know why it's important, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why it's important. So really, since 2002, Congress has completely abdicated its constitutional role in decisions about war and peace. In 2001, they passed the 2001 authorization for use of military force, and then in 2002, they passed this Iraq authorization, and basically have not come back to the table on either of them to vote and debate. And so it's really important that we convince Congress that this is part of its job, that this is not a power that the executive holds solely. And so we've been really focused on getting the 2002 Iraq War authorization off the books, and then focusing on the even bigger one, which is the 2001 AUMF. And we've seen a lot of progress over the years. And we've seen a lot of progress this year. So this year we have a bill in both the House and the Senate. Both of them are bipartisan.
And the big news that Diane was pointing to is that yesterday we heard that Representative Barbara Lee's bill, HR 256, is headed to the House floor for a vote next week. So little hand wave for that. That's really amazing. Advocacy teams have been working really for many more years than just this year, but have been working for the past 5 months to build co-sponsors and really put pressure on Congress to make that vote happen. So that's really exciting. So after you watch the advocacy team video after this call, I want you all to take a moment and call your representative and ask them to support this bill. It's HR 256. So do that call for me afterwards. It won't take you long, I promise. So in the Senate, let me tell you about the progress there, because they're not slouching either on this issue. We have a bill by Senators Kaine and Young, bipartisan bill SJ Res 10, to repeal the 1991 and 2002 Iraq AUMFs. This bill has 17 sponsors or 16 co-sponsors, and it's bipartisan as well. And we're hearing that it's headed for a markup in committee soon. So imminently that is happening. And that's really wonderful too. If the committee votes to approve it, it'll be the first time that has happened ever in the Senate, that they would vote to repeal it. So that's really amazing as well. And I'll just give you a little short story. I was talking to Justin, who does some of our data work for strategic advocacy, and looking at the numbers of our teams lobbying. And out of those 17 sponsors of the Senate bill, advocacy teams have lobbied 15 of those offices since 2018. So, we always really struggle to tell the story of, are we making a difference? But I think that really shows that we're making a difference. And one more point, just because I can't help myself. This year, we've had more co-sponsors than ever before. And for instance, we have Senator Grassley from Iowa is a co-sponsor of this bill this year. He's, I believe, never been on a bill to repeal an authorization for use of military force. And while the Iowa team isn't wanting to take credit for this, I'm telling them that their 6 years of relationship building really made a difference in giving that opportunity for Senator Grassley to know about these bills and to take that step of sponsoring this legislation. So I'll stop there.
One of the great things we do internally at FCNL is we like to share stories and affirm both what our staff does, but what people in the grassroots network do. And Shoshana and Sarah are often full of stories like this that are so great. And I want to focus on this a little bit, Shoshana, because what you have done and what FCNL has been able to do through advocacy teams is really striking, because I think it's both a program that trains people, obviously, to be strong advocates, and trains them in a particular approach that we call Quaker lobbying, and it's not ours alone, but it's something that is really consistent with how we believe we should be engaging with people. But I want to say too, it's kind of remarkable. I've been on a couple of lobby visits with some of our grassroots advocates who really have done the work of building relationships with members of Congress. And it's always kind of heartening to go into a meeting with Senator Murkowski and hear her say, "Oh, hi, David, how's everything going?" Or I've been in a meeting with Senator Baldwin, from Wisconsin, with Roger and John, who were part of that first advocacy team. And, they know one another. And that we think that makes a difference. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about our approach in this notion of building relationships, and how does it happen? How long does it take? Why does it work sometimes and doesn't work all the time?
Oh man, the question started easy and got more difficult as you kept going. Well, I think that Quaker advocacy and our approach is really, the magic sauce. There's no. When I was talking actually to our Boise team the other day, and it's hard work, right? These members of Congress are not easy. Gretchen, I'm looking at you. I know that you're struggling to do this, and it really is like a faithful practice. And I'm not Quaker, but I've been at FCNL for almost 3 years now, and I really identify with the pray with your feet mentality. Like the really, if we really believe this, we have to do it with our whole heart, and we have to do it especially when it's hard. And so there are three things that I really point to when I tell people about Quaker advocacy. One is that focus on relationship building. Two is always looking for that of God or the spirit or the light in the person that you're speaking to, whether it be a staff member or a member of Congress, or someone on the street, your neighbor. And then three is speaking truth to power. Especially after this last election, especially after January 6th, we need to be able to speak strongly into our convictions and tell our members of Congress in the most respectful way possible, hopefully, that this is what we believe. And that's what our teams are doing, is looking for space to do that, and trying to do it in a way that they'll be heard most completely. And so, yeah, I think that's really what our teams are doing. And it's definitely a struggle. I've heard people say that this is their faith practice, and that it makes them a better Quaker or a better, member of whatever faith community that they're a part of by doing this work. And it does sound like an easy formula, but it's not. Our teams are always asking the questions of how do we show up with an open heart to these meetings? How do we make ourselves heard? And how do we speak truth to power when no one's listening? And so I don't have an answer to any of those questions, but I think that those are the questions that our team asks when they're preparing for their lobby visits, and that's what they are looking for when they're doing their research. And looking for openings, looking for way open in those meetings.
The other part that I think is so powerful that I've seen or heard when I've participated in some of the advocacy teams calls is the power of the community to problem solve with each other as well. And that to me is kind of a remarkable aspect of this. It's not that, as you just said, you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to problem solve with people to think about how they can make progress. And I think that's really exciting. Talk a little bit about, we have all these teams in 44 states. In some cases, we have more than one team in a state. How do the teams come together, and what's the role that they play? What's the commitment that they're making when they participate?
Yeah, so in many cases now, we have more than one team in a state, and it's been part of what we're doing is helping those teams connect with each other and collaborate. When a team decides to form, we ask them that they really commit to building relationships with their members of Congress and commit for at least a year to this program of really learning the skills. We do lots of training, you get ready, and then you connect with the other teams in your state. So we're really doing some amazing work with statewide organizing. I think the last time I was on Thursdays with Friends in last June, I talked about statewide networks. And at that point, we were just kind of piloting that program. Now we have many teams with 3, 4, 7, or 9 teams in a state, such as Tennessee and Texas and Michigan and California and others. And it's been really wonderful to watch their collaboration. And I just have a couple examples of the work that they're doing, because it's we're not, Washington, John, I see your comment, Washington as well. They're going on lobby visits together. We've seen huge numbers on our lobby visits. I think before this last year of the pandemic, we didn't have any recorded lobby visits with over 10 people on a lobby visit. This year, we've had 34 meetings with advocacy teams that had more than 10 people on a lobby visit. A lot of that is that statewide organizing. Washington State, Oregon's been doing a great job with this, Michigan. So that's really wonderful. Our 9 teams in California have made it their mission to get all 35 congressional districts covered by advocacy teams. So they're helping us start new teams as well. And that also really helps when it's hard to get a meeting. So I want to point to our Tennessee teams. We have, I think, 3 or 4 teams in Tennessee, and they finally got a visit with Senator Blackburn after months and months of working on it. And they just had a visit with 13 advocates from across the state, really from across the state. And so it's really wonderful to see that statewide collaboration happen and see those teams work together.
So one of the things I want to ask about is this year, a lot of as people know who are on this call, FCNL advocates on a number of issues. We have a set of legislative priorities that are both domestic and foreign policy. And we think that there's a real strength in having the focus of the advocacy teams on an issue, but people have other interests. People care about a whole variety of issues. And so I'm interested in hearing you talk a little bit about, well, two things. One, my observation is that it's particularly powerful for members of Congress to hear their constituents talk to them about foreign policy and about war and peace issues, because they tend to think of that as more of a kind of Washington, policy wonkish thing. And so to have constituents who are, retired people or teachers or, grocery store clerks or whatever they may be doing, willing to talk to them about this issue of take back your authority to repeal the use of military force seems to have a particular resonance. At the same time, I think we've seen advocacy teams who have shown an interest in maybe branching out a bit. Can you talk about how you're managing that? How does that work for particular teams?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point and a good observation to what teams are experiencing. So first, one of the reasons we've been working on advocacy teams on foreign policy, as you said, is because we really do believe that there's a little bit of an outsized impact. There are not very many constituents hitting the hill, virtually hitting the hill, on foreign policy. It's not something that there's a lot of organization around and a lot of grassroots advocacy. And so we do find that our teams can make an outsized impact in that space. And it's really important. I think one of the things that we've been exploring this year is, and I think we've been seeing it talked about more widely in the activist community, is the relationship between the war economy and U.S. militarism on domestic policy, right? We spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on war machines and war-making industries at the expense of being able to provide for our communities here at home. And there's like a trickle down of weapons from military down to our communities. And we see that with a militarized police force and the 1033 program. And so one of the things that we've really been focused on this year is making sure that we're telling that story, that we're helping folks understand that, and also giving more space to what your last point is. We taught you how to advocate. You know how to do this. If you want to set up an additional meeting, do it. I've been trying to say that as much as possible. We don't want everyone to, stop working on AUMF repeal altogether, because I think we can really make it happen this year. Please don't give up on it. But if you feel motivated to lobby to end the 1033 program, or to lobby for SNAP benefits or the child tax credit, or really anything under the sun. FCNL works on so many issues, and we have leave behinds on so many issues. You have all the skills to do it, and I'll connect you if you need to. But that's one of the things that we're also saying is that, we want folks to feel fulfilled as advocates and activists in this work. And it's all connected. It's all connected. And we're here to help you advocate, and you're helping us advocate.
So we are starting to get a couple questions, and we do have time for questions. So I want to encourage you to add those in. Before we go to this first question, though, Shoshana, I want to just ask you to repeat. We try to promote every time. We have simpler ways. If people don't quite feel they're ready to be part of an advocacy team on an ongoing basis. First of all, you don't know what you're missing, because it's a lot of fun, and you should think about it if you aren't part of one. But if you don't feel that yet, you could still go to one of our Learn to Lobby in 30 Minutes session. Can you talk that up a little bit and just say what that is?
Yeah. So if you're feeling nervous about advocating, you're really good with the information, you're good at taking in all the things and reading all the articles, I really want to encourage you to take that into action and go actually lobby your members of Congress. It's really easy during this time. Setting up a Zoom meeting is much easier than, hauling your way to an office. And so the Learn to Lobby calls are offered, I think, once a month at this point. I have to check the schedule, or maybe one of the folks online can put it into the chat. But the Learn to Lobby call is just a 30-minute call where you learn the basics of how to lobby, what goes into it. And Sarah Freeman-Wolpert will walk you through those details and also answer your questions along the way as you're doing that. One of the things that we found since Sarah started doing these calls over a year ago is that folks are starting to lobby on their own. And after they lobby and find out it's not so hard, they're joining advocacy teams, or they're applying for our programs, or they're really, they're starting to engage and set up visits in their own community. And so that's a really good jumping off point if you want to get your feet wet and learn the basics on a personal level with Sarah.
Great. That's great. So one of the questions is, where do we put climate change as a foreign policy issue, domestic policy issue? And I'll just start by saying, we right now, the way we classify it, just for the purposes of our structure internally, is that we put climate change in our domestic policy, but we are keenly aware that it is a global concern and that we have to pay attention to it, both in terms of what the U.S. is doing in terms of domestic policy, but also how we are engaging in the world or not. And thankfully, we are now re-engaging in a more dramatic way, but we have such a long way to go and so critical to make changes in policies. I will just say as an aside, we are tracking very carefully what's in the American Jobs Plan that President Biden has put forward that can address this. So there is information on our website about that, and I encourage you to go take a look at that. Shoshana, anything you want to say about that? Does that come up with the advocacy teams? And
yeah, I mean, our advocates, one of the things I was thinking about as I was, preparing for this is our advocates are part of every organization you could ever imagine on every issue. We have folks in Citizens Climate Lobby, we have folks in the Results Organization, we have Indivisible folks. So our folks care about every issue under the sun, and it's an important issue to care about. One of the intersections that we've been talking about for climate is just how much of a polluter and terrible thing for the environment the military industrial complex is. And so as we're looking for kind of moments of intersection between issues that we really care about and understanding the full scope, you could talk about that. You can talk about, climate change as a national security issue. You can talk about lots of this in a lot of different ways. And I think this is definitely something we all care about. We need a world to have a world we seek that's free of war. And so I think that's, a really important thing to care about and advocate for. I also sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the carbon footprint of the military is just exorbitant. And when you think about the transfer of troops and military hardware and then the devastation that is an output of, result of war is truly, I mean, we often talk about it in human terms, but human terms are related directly to climate change as well. So that's a huge connection. Absolutely. Yeah. So Shoshana, people want to take up other issues. What do you say? I mean, Ian had a great question. I mean, obviously you use the term leave behinds. People go where on the FCNL website if they want to find out, more about some of the other issues. How would they go about doing that? And just say a little bit about lobbying during the pandemic and how that's going.
Yeah. So I don't know the direct link off the top of my head. So I'm hoping that some folks from FCNL can help me out. But there is a page on our website that has the updated leave behinds on many different issues that we lobby on. I saw Ian's question. He asked if we're lobbying on other issues, can we identify ourselves as affiliated with FCNL? And I think my litmus test is that if you are bringing an FCNL leave behind on your lobby visit and you're doing it in the FCNL style of lobbying, which I know you would do, Ian, absolutely, you can call yourself an FCNL advocate. And the other piece is to report your lobby visits to us, even if you're not lobbying on the advocacy team issue. So one of the things, I don't want you to feel shame if you're lobbying on something you care about. Send us a report because, Clarence on our climate lobbying team wants to read your reports on climate change so that he can follow up with those offices. So send us reports regardless. You're not going to be in trouble for lobbying on another issue. It's really wonderful to see you taking those actions. Thank you, Susan, for putting the link to the leave behind from the chat.
I love that you're emphasizing the part about getting the lobby reports. We have a pretty good tracking system that we use here at FCNL about all lobby visits that we do. And we count how many lobby visits we have, both by grassroots advocates and by our Hill staff. And we make connections all the time. So our Hill staff can go in and take a look at a particular member of Congress and see who's been lobbying. Shoshana, can you share a story where you've seen like an advocacy team work directly with a lobbyist here to do, or one of our program assistants to do a visit where, it's clear that there are some lawmakers who have more weight on particular issues. And so sometimes we think it's important to talk to every member, but there are sometimes where we might focus on a particular senator or a particular member of the House. Can you think of any example of like a story where, either Heather or Julia or one of our lobbyists was connecting with a team and that had kind of an even bigger impression?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was actually the story I was going to bring out is Heather and Julia. At the very beginning of this year, we knew we were going to be working on repealing the 2002 Iraq AUMF. And because we knew we were going to be working on that, we knew we needed to build an even stronger bond with Senator Young's office. Senator Young has long been the Republican co-sponsor with Senator Kaine on these bills. And we needed to show a lot of support for Senator Young to reintroduce this. And so our Indianapolis team met with Heather and Julia and Senator Young's staff really early on. I think the visit maybe happened the first week of January. And that was really a wonderful experience because then Heather and Julia were able to follow up in subsequent meetings with the staffer that they met with. And so it really opened a door to, a lobby visit and to a relationship at a really critical moment.
Myself on mute there. Okay, thank you. That's a great story. And just to say, I want to note Senator Young is as a Republican of Indiana and has been a real ally on different pieces of legislation, not on every piece of legislation we worked on, but several. FCNL is a nonpartisan organization, and we do this work on a bipartisan basis. And I think one of the things, just coming back to the specific issue of repealing the AUMF, is that we do see a lot of bipartisan support here. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that. We're about out of time here, so I'm just invite you to make any remarks about the bipartisan nature of what you're seeing with regard to the possibility of repealing the AUMF, the 2002 AUMF. And then if you have any closing remarks, to invite you to think about what you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I think this effort is really coming through this year is because it's bipartisan. It's kind of agreed upon in Congress, I think. Whether they vote that the way fully, I'm not sure, but I think it's agreed upon in Congress on both sides of the aisle that the 2002 Iraq AUMF is not needed, it's not necessary, and it creates potential for future abuse. And so that's a really wonderful thing to capitalize on. I think, the polarized times that we live in, it makes it really challenging to focus on bipartisanship. But I think in this instance, it's a good way to just get this AUMF off the books and to move on to other things that we need to accomplish, and to get Congress to start reasserting its authority. I think one of the reasons this issue has been so successful across party lines is that it's about strengthening the institution of Congress, right? It's about making sure that the executive isn't too strong. And I think that's been one of the best arguments for making sure that Congress is addressing its congressional war authority, is that we need Congress to be strong, right? We need Congress to be strong for our government to function. So stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to say that I am so excited to see what we can do this year, repealing the 2002 AUMF. And I am absolutely convinced that the advocates that are part of our advocacy teams are the little engine that could, or maybe the big engine that could. I mean, really have just been consistently pushing on this in a way that is just remarkable. And we talk often about consistency and persistence, and I want to affirm how important that is. I want to say thank you to all of you who are participating with us today, for participating in all of our advocacy, for being donors to FCNL. Your financial support is so critical to what we do, and your advocacy, your willingness to make phone calls and to reach out is so critical. And then I also want to just make sure that I say our next Thursdays with Friends is 2 weeks from today. And I think we had the wrong, I think it's the 24th. Yeah, am I right? 24th of, anyway, the great news is another staff person, Marisa Leon Gomez, who does our immigration and refugee work, will be joining us to speak about that and what's going on with that right now. So before we finally sign off, Shoshana, what do you want to say to everybody?
Well, I want to say thank you, particularly to our advocacy teams who wanted to listen to me speak again. I'm really thrilled to have you on here and to have you with us. And I also want to say congratulations to you for getting to this point of this House vote. And for all of our other folks on the line, I want to thank you for supporting the program, being interested in the program. I know there are donors on the line who support it in a lot of different ways. So I want to thank them. And I want to remind you of the activity that I told you all I would ask of you after this call, which is to call your representative's office and ask them to support the repeal of the 2002 AUMF HR 256, which is coming up for a vote next week. So please do that. Even if you're not on the advocacy team, it'll really help us out, and we'll get this AUMF repealed this year. Thank you all.
And just to thank you, Shoshana, and just to remind you that there is that video that some of you got to see right before we started is a great video that offers perspective. I mean, I love Dot from Fredericksburg and Joy from New Orleans and Meg from Virginia. I mean, we have the voices of people who are very active in our advocacy teams. And Shoshana is the star of it. So just to say that, please do share that. If you go to the website, it's a short video. And if you want to encourage people to participate with us, it's a great way to introduce the advocacy team's work. And so we hope you'll share that as well. Thank you, friends, so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks when we're talking about immigration and refugees. Take care, everyone.